Why are exams so hard? Why do teachers make exams so hard? When I was a student, I asked this question myself, and I didn't really get much of an answer to it. And I think because I didn't understand why teachers made exams difficult, I was really frustrated, and I got myself into a lot of grief because of it. And I see that happening now around me as well. I see people, no one likes doing hard exams. People are really grieved by hard exams. And I think now that I've become a teacher, I've learned a lot of things that make sense of why teachers write hard exams. And that's why I try my best to write exams that are hard, that are challenging. And I've come up with a few reasons which I hope explain why we do this, and also might even give you reason to actually not just understand why exams are hard, but actually want them to be hard, okay? So I've got 5 reasons, all right? And this is just my opinion. Like, it's not an official stance or anything, but I hope these reasons, the reasons that I've come up with, make sense to you and help, okay? So here we go. Reason number 1. In exams, raw marks are meaningless, okay? Here's why this is important. When I supervise an exam and I'm finishing it up, I'm collecting the papers, and as I leave the exam hall, one of the things that I'll often hear is people saying, oh, like, I can't believe how hard that exam was. Like, I've already lost 7 marks, okay? Or I'll hear things like, oh, I couldn't even do any of the last question at all. Max, I'm gonna get 75%. That was a terrible test, okay? So people say that a lot. Now, here's the thing that you need to get, right? If you got given a hard exam, right, that means everyone in the grade also got a hard exam. So everyone's going to be hit equally, right? Now, the reason that is important is because when it comes to why your marks are important, what we do with the marks, if we're, for example, putting you into classes on the basis of the marks of an exam, right? And I understand people often get really stressed out because so much is riding on their exam, which class they're going to get into, okay? The important thing is not the raw mark you get. The important thing is your rank, right? Your position relative to others in the grade. And so your raw mark, it might be really, really low, but so will everyone's, right? The important thing is how you perform with regard to other people. That's what matters for classes. And I hope you see, no matter the difficulty of the exam, within reason, okay, the rankings of the grade will not really be affected, okay? So raw marks, they're not really that important. You know, by the time they get to your reports anyway, they've been quite heavily modified, okay? So don't worry about raw marks and how an exam makes your raw marks really terrible, okay? Raw marks are really quite meaningless, okay? All right, reason number 2. Easy exams, they don't distinguish skill levels, okay? You think about this, it'll make sense. If we set an exam that's super, super simple, the questions are, it's a short exam, and the questions are very easy, and everyone can do them, okay? What will happen is you come out of the exam thinking, oh, that's great, you know, I did really well on that exam, but everyone will do really well. The strong students will do well, obviously, but the weaker students will also do very well because the questions were also simple, or because there was no time pressure, really, okay? Now, the reason why that's a disaster is because when it comes to us putting you into classes, for example, we can't distinguish between who's who. We can't work out whether you belong in this class or that class because everyone's marks look the same when you have an easy exam, okay? And so that's not a good thing. Now, you might think, I'll be really glad if I can slip into 10J instead of 10R, or into 12M2 instead of 12M3, okay? But let me try and persuade you, it's not a good thing to be in a class where really you don't fit. Because what's going to happen is, all throughout the year, you're just going to find the people around you will understand the concepts much quicker than you, and you'll just be lagging behind, and when you want to ask questions, the teacher will want to move on, because everyone else has moved on, and you're going to struggle, and you'll turn to your friend next to you and say, hey, I don't get this, and they'll be already onto something else, and it's actually a very difficult thing to be in a class where you're beyond your limits, where you're exceeding your capacities. Better to just be pushing them a little bit than to be in a place where actually you don't belong, okay? And so when exams are hard, they help us put you in the right classes. When questions aren't just simple straightforward, but have multiple parts, right, that get more difficult as you go, then we can tell who can really do the more difficult things, and so who's more appropriate to go into a higher class. Okay. All right, so reason number 3, and this is a big reason, difficult exams, hard exams are learning experiences. Hard exams will help you learn, okay? So it's one thing to look at a concept in the program, right, and say, oh yeah, the chain rule, differentiation, calculus, I understand that, and think to yourself, I can do this question, right? That's one thing. It's another thing entirely to, under exam pressure, be able to recognize that the derivative of, the derivative of log cos x is negative tan x, okay? And to recognize that when everything is really, really under pressure, those are two different things, right? And it's the same in all kinds of areas of life. So, for instance, it's one thing to sit back and watch Jamie Oliver, cooking a 30-minute meal, and he puts together this delicious Spanish and ricotta cannelloni. Okay, it looks really easy. It looks really easy when Benji Marshall throws a dummy at exactly the right time and makes a line break. It sounds really easy when Gautier sings Somebody That I Used to Know, right? He makes it look very easy. But it's another thing entirely, and you find out when you actually try it yourself that, it's not as easy as it looks. You burn the cannelloni, your dummy pass is completely unconvincing, and, your voice cracks when you try to hit the octave jump in the chorus. And the point is that, you learn your areas of weakness when you actually test them. And difficult exams test them more than easy ones. Does that make sense? So when you come out of an easy exam, you might think, oh, hey, I'm not so bad after all. That may be true, but it doesn't help you to learn anything. It doesn't show you that when you've got a locus and you've got 2 square root expressions from distance equations on one side of the equation, you can't just square everything out and hope it's going to come out in the wash. You've got to rearrange things before you do that. Or, when you do the easy exam, it doesn't reveal that if you don't read the question, even if it's the very first paper, very first question on the paper, you're not going to get the question right because you weren't paying attention, right? So difficult exams will help you learn because they reveal your weaknesses, right? And so we should learn to, in fact, appreciate them. Let me illustrate this another way, and I owe this illustration actually to an old student named Chi Wai. So, if you're out there watching Chi Wai, thanks for this one. Chi Wai was a runner, and sometimes, some mornings, I would see him practicing sprints out on the oval. And you could recognize him a mile away because he did something very unusual when he was sprinting. He actually wore a parachute. He strapped a parachute onto his back. And so when he ran, it would kick up because of the air resistance and it would make him run slower. Okay. Now, why did he do that? Why would he go to the effort of making things harder for himself? And he's not the only one. I have friends who play basketball, and when they train, they strap weights onto their ankles as they're playing basketball. Why do they do that? Well, I take it the reason why the parachutes and the weights are something they do to themselves is because they're voluntarily making things harder for themselves, because making it harder for themselves helps them to get stronger and faster, and enables them, when they take off those constraints, to just totally blow away the competition and perform at a much higher level, right? And hard exams are the same. They're pushing you to your limits so that when you do exams, which, when you get to the actual HSE, you'll be fine, you'll blitz it, right? Because you've had the difficult practice. Okay, reason number 4, and this is the reason no one likes to hear. But difficult, that experience, that difficulty that you find in the exam, difficult is relative. It's relative, okay? If people come out of an exam saying, oh, that was crazy, oh, that was so hard, I felt like rage quitting after 10 minutes, okay? Let's think about this for a second. There are 2 main plausible reasons why you had that experience with the exam. Now, firstly, the exam could just have been really hard, okay? That's definitely a possibility. But it's not the only one. Secondly, it could be that you and your grade are just much weaker than you realize. Okay? Now, these two aren't mutually exclusive. They can happen at the same time, but I hope you see the point. That when an exam feels difficult, who says it was a difficult exam, really? Isn't it possible, couldn't it be, that if another grade had sat this exam, they might not find it difficult. They might just find it average, right? Couldn't it be that the grade as a whole just really needs to pull their socks up and work harder at, the more difficult questions and complete the assigned work that we give you, Couldn't it be that really the exam was just normal and it's about your level of competence, not just the difficulty of the exam? Now, that being said, I don't think the exams you do are easy, okay? That's not our intention. That's what I've been trying to explain why we do that, right? But don't make excuses. And don't just assume it's the exam's fault, right? If you find the exam difficult, don't just question the exam, question yourself as well, right? Be sobered by the fact that your marks were a bit lower than you expected. There's sometimes something that really frustrates us is we give you questions that coincidentally turn up in the exam. The exact same question, maybe the numbers are different, right? And you still do poorly on them. Or we give you specific advice, say in the post-mortem after an exam, and the following exam, you continue to make the same errors, right? Now, we all do that, we're all human. But that's indicating that the fault is not the exam. It's that you've got to work harder at your revision and the effort that you're putting into it, okay? So don't just blame the exam. Question yourself as well, because difficulty is relative. Okay, so let me review. Number one, raw marks are meaningless. Number two, easy exams don't sort you, right? So hard exams help us to tell you apart. Number three, hard exams help you to learn. Number four, difficulty is relative between, grades and years. Lastly, most importantly, exams as a whole, they're not the most important thing in life, okay? Exams are way down the list of the things that should be important to you. And so for me, one of the biggest things is that those who respond negatively to these exams do so almost universally because they place too much emphasis on the exams. I've seen exams, I've written exams where people leave the exam hall and they shed tears afterwards. Okay? Now, I don't mean disrespect, and I don't want to trivialize the difficulty that you find with these exams, but if an exam makes you cry, if it moves you that emotionally, then you've placed too much importance and emphasis on the exam. It's right to view these exams as important, but only so much so that you put decent effort into them and actually give it a real go and not just say, oh, whatever, it's an exam. You shouldn't view the exams as so important that they're really affecting you in that deep way, right, and causing you grief, okay? So if you understand and believe this reason, I think a lot of the other reasons will fall into place. And I hope that helps you make sense of why we write hard exams and why you should appreciate them, actually.